Sometimes there are Civ leader matches that are right under your nose. We might not notice them because the Civ and leader have no real world connections, but aside from that, putting them together is not all that outrageous. For example, when I first started playing Civ 7 and stumbled on how good Tecumseh was with the Greeks, the Shawnee, and Siam, I kind of forgot about the Shawnee over time. It wasn't that they weren't solid, but I really liked the Greeks more, and Siam had been a total surprise who I kept revisiting. It was only recently when I tried the Shawnee out with Confucius for their disaster resistance abilities that I realized how very strong they were, or at least very steady. Or was that just because of their melding so nicely with Confucius? In any case, I put that in the back of my mind. Meanwhile, I realized I'd been neglecting Lakshmibai, who I had loved when she released, and I started a game with her and Shilla, just to see if both of their diplomatic abilities could carry the day without a super strong military presence. That worked out quite nicely. So I decided to look at a diplomatic civ for exploration, and well, there weren't a ton of choices, but it was ultimately the pure diplomatic bonus that the Shawnee received that tipped the balance. And since I had a number of new, not fully grown settlements, I liked their growth bonuses too. The question was, could that translate into a good enough combo to get me into Modern, where I had a couple of civs already in mind that I was a lot more certain about? I wanted to try and get as many legacy paths finished as possible. And as we go through this, you'll realize that I still do like the legacy paths, as much as I understand they needed some revision before, Firaxis announced they were retiring them. For me, they are a way of measuring my overall success, and the challenge of becoming a well-rounded civ by scoring points on each of the paths was a great idea. I think the triumphs can also lead to a well-rounded civ, but in a different way, so I'm willing to let the legacy paths go. I will point out that in a recent subscriber questionnaire I ran, the triumphs were the most highly anticipated part of the update. So that makes me feel better as well, as a sign that we are heading towards an overall improvement. But I'll keep running games with legacy paths until the update lands. Anyway, my game plan was to get as many legacy points as I could, which meant my focus wasn't going to be purely on the military game because that so often distracts me. And I was going to try and remain peaceful, despite Lakshmibai's obvious tendencies. My thinking on this was simple: suzerain, and then incorporate as many city-states as possible to boost the overall size of my forces, because of course I inherit all the forces for Lakshmibai that come from those city-states. She gets everybody that's in there. One of the things I've learned the hard way is that if you neglect your military, no matter how nice you are to everyone, someone is going to sniff out the weakness in the air and attack you. If you're really lucky, it'll only be one attacker. But if you keep your unit numbers in among the top 3 or so of all the players, and you play mostly nice, you can keep the peace in a lot of cases. A lot of caveats there, I know. Meanwhile, if you suzerain enough city-states, you can use your missionaries to convert them once you have the icon's belief. You got to snap that up pretty early on, though. But if you get the icon's belief, you can go after city-states to get your relics. So you get the suzerain bonus, the relic for the conversion, and the eventual incorporated city-state as a settlement towards the military path. The first part of the plan is great for any diplomatic leader and civ, and the second part goes well with any militaristic predispositions. Then it's a matter of not neglecting your science and your economy if you want to get even more legacy points. And legacy points translate to triumphs once the new update arrives. It's the same idea. How many can you complete? My no war goal was actually pretty easy to sustain given how much groundwork Scylla had laid. There was a lot of goodwill left over from antiquity, and I was careful to not neglect anyone, getting into occasional deals and sending merchants everyone's way. But I did consider the possible downside if there were no city-states, something that happened to me in Modern during the last workshop when I was running Siam and found myself with no one to suzerain. The only upside was that my most aggressive opponents were, ironically, Lakshmibai and Tecumseh, and they were just as screwed as I was. I hope the devs take another look at the hyper-aggressive settling patterns of the AI. Otherwise, some leaders in civs will never be successful in Modern. But this was only exploration, so there were plenty of civs to suzerain, even though in a couple of instances when I found myself in competition for a city-state, I had to decide if it was worth getting another civ angry at me. In both cases, I decided to back off and look for other uncommitted city-states. I was pretty good for a change about sticking to my game plan. Meanwhile, I was getting a lot of influence from the Shawnee and all the food I could hope for. I know it makes for more exciting viewing when things go wrong, but that just didn't happen this time. The only questions were the science legacy path and the militaristic. I had the cultural one completed so quickly that I started shifting my emphasis to science, hoping the economic points would come along naturally. But I hadn't gotten the militaristic win before without conquering at least one settlement. It does come down to happiness. Could I keep everyone happy and productive while I incorporated one settlement after another? If you go the military route, it's a little quicker and it costs you less happiness in a way. Let's just say that without a steady economy and developing tech, you can't get the happiness buildings to help keep your settlements on side. Like I said before, it's all about balancing. In this case, balancing a lot of factors, just like every match, really. This is a fundamental aspect of Civ games that I like most. You have to learn multiple ways to play the game and fit them together. As far as throwing influence around goes, that was the balancing act within the balancing act. I had to spend influence to keep other leaders happy, then spend influence to suzerain city-states, then spend even more to incorporate them. The traditions of the Scylla and the steady influence from the Shawnee made this a lot easier. What did all this get me? Well, for one thing, I was 4 over the settlement limit by the end of the age with 20 settlements. I'd completed all 4 legacy paths, although, like I implied, the military one turned out to be a squeaker. And I finished the exploration on turn 87. Sure, I was only playing on Immortal with nerfed independent powers, but that was still pretty cool. All I can say is, I am now a fan of the Shawnee, and a continuing fan of Lakshmibai. And I'm still learning new ways to combine leaders and civs to get very decent results. Even without the upcoming changes, there's still a lot to uncover here. With the changes, who knows when I'll come up for air. In any case, if you've liked what you've seen or heard here, please drop a like or a subscribe down below. This has been Civilized Raccoon, and I'll see you next time.